Hello, what's up YouTube? Ronix with another tutorial, and in this tutorial I'll show you guys high-end skin retouching and color grading from the very start to the very end. So in this tutorial, I want to see how to process raw files in Capture One and also how to do skin retouching using frequency separation in Photoshop, and later on do color grading, eye whitening, and finally how to export the image in Photoshop. So first of all, we are in the Capture One interface, and you may be wondering why my Capture One interface is looking the way it is. How I made it to look like this, I simply came to Window. So I came to Window right here, and I came to Workspace, then I came to Migration, so that I had everything on my right hand side. So like in Photoshop, Capture One also has layers, and this is maybe the basic panel like the one we do have in the Lightroom Classic. So first thing we want to do for this very image, I'm just going to come and do some little bit of adjustments. So I'm going to start with the dynamic range, and I'm going to push this down, all the way down, and do the same for my whites because I feel like I have so many whites in the image. I'm also going to push the blacks just a little bit to around 46. Then when I'm done doing all that, I'm going to come to my clarity and add some little bit of clarity to around 4. Then I'm going to come all the way down to my dehaze because I feel like I have some kind of hazy feel. I'm just going to push up my dehaze button to around 7. I think that looks fine. Then anything I want to do is my levels. I'm going to come and push in my blacks just like that, and do the same for my whites just like that. Then since I feel like I have some little bit of shadows, I'm going to come to the shadow area, and I'm just going to knock it up and pull up my blacks. And I hope you can see the before and after. So this was the image before, and this is where we are before and after. Just going to put that off. Then the next thing I want to do is coming to the color profile or the ICC profile and changing it to Pro Standard. So what this does, it helps me eliminate most of the magentas embedded in the Canon cameras because I shot this image using my Canon 6D camera. Then after doing that, I'm going to come to the layer option, and I'm going to create a new field layer for color grading and matching the skin color of this model. So I'm just going to right click under the layers, so come right click and create a new field adjustment layer which is going to contain the color grading or the matching of the colors of this model's portrait. And after you have created this new adjustment layer, you can see we have the opacity slider on top. I'm just going to come down all the way down to my color editor, and I'm going to come to a skin tone area and get the color picker tool. So I'm just going to zoom in. You can see that we have different tonal variations for this very model. We have some kind of magentas, then we have yellows right here, and we have the lipstick which is red in color. So what I want to do, I'm going to come and select the area that I want the rest of the skin to look like. Just going to sample, I think around here, and you can see it has selected this area which contains yellows and oranges and some kind of reds. So after you have selected that, you're going to zoom out, command minus to zoom out. I'm just going to come to a uniformity slider and just start pushing this up just like that as I'm looking at the image, so that the overall skin tones can really match in this image. So I'm just going to push it up. Then I can slightly increase on the saturation just like that. Don't mind if at all it is affecting the lipstick of the model, and you can see right now the tones or skin tones of the model are really matching well. And you can come and reduce on the saturation just a little bit to around 2.1. Then if at all you want to erase and get back the original color of the lipstick, remember it has affected the lipstick color and you don't want to mess up the original makeup that was added by the makeup artist. So I'm just going to come up to my layer option and get my eraser tool and make sure the adjustment layer or this new field layer is selected, and simply come and zoom in, command plus or control plus, and start painting over the lip area of the model just like that, and just continue painting on the lipstick area to reveal or get back the original color of the lipstick that we had initially before. So you can see, I think that looks fine. Then we are going to do the same for the eyeshadow of the model so that we can get back the original color of the eyeshadow of the model. So just come and erase the color grading effect or the color match effect from the eyeshadow area. So just like that, and you're going to get back the eyeshadow area. So that looks nice to me. So next thing we want to do is taking the image into Photoshop to do the skin retouching. And in order to export the image into Photoshop, just going to come to image and come to edit with and select Photoshop 2020. So format I usually prefer TIFF. Then ICC profile RGB and resolution 300 pixels, and I prefer 16-bit of course. And I'm just going to come to edit variants, and I'm going to export the image into Photoshop for the skin retouching. So let's wait for this to be exported into Photoshop, and when it is done, it's going to open straight away into the Photoshop software. And here we are in Photoshop. So what we want to do, the very first thing we want to do in Photoshop is cropping this image. So in order to crop the image into Photoshop, you're just going to come and get the crop tool. So whichever tool you're getting in Photoshop, always make sure that the caps lock key is turned off, because when it is turned on, you're going to be getting that cross-like icon for every tool you select in Photoshop. So the ratio I'm going to select 4:5. I'm just going to click right and drag until I get more emphasis onto the model's face. I think that is fine. Just going to crop it in just like that so that we can have more emphasis onto the model's face, and simply hit enter to approve the crop settings. So you can see the image is now ready for the skin retouching process. So what we are going to be learning is frequency separation for the skin retouching. And what is frequency separation? Frequency separation is a skin retouching technique that divides the image into the high frequency and the low frequency. So under the high frequency we have the textures, and under the low frequency we have the colors, the skin tones, so that when you combine both the high frequency or the textures and the colors, we are going to be able to get back the image the way it is meant to look. So let's create those two layers, that is the high frequency layer and the low frequency layer. So I'm just going to make sure the background layer is selected and simply hit Ctrl or Command J twice, and you can simply double click. So this is going to be our low frequency, or you can call it whichever name you want, and you're going to name this the high frequency, just like that, and simply hit enter. So we want to remain with specifics on these layers. So I'm just going to come and deactivate or hide the visibility of the high frequency layer and come and select the low frequency layer. So for the low frequency layer, we only want to remain with the colors and the skin tones. And in order to remain with those colors or skin tones, you're just going to come to filter, and you're going to come to blur, and you're just going to come to Gaussian blur. So when you come to Gaussian blur, we only want to ensure that we have only and only the colors in this very layer. So just going to put the radius all the way down and simply click on the area that seems to have more texture. So you have to simply click right there, and I think most of the textures are on this around the forehead area. So you have to move this radius up to a point when you're losing out, or when you're starting to lose out completely on the skin texture. So come to the radius and simply start clicking and moving up to that point when you're losing out. So what I'm doing, I'm simply left clicking on this icon and simply dragging it towards the right hand side up to a point when I'm starting to completely lose out on the details right there. So I think at around 10, you can see I've lost out on every texture in this very image, and I can only see the colors. So you shouldn't cram this, because different cameras have different sharpness or different megapixels that are going to be capturing the images, and you're going to be having different details according to the images captured by those cameras. So I'm just going to come and simply hit OK to approve the settings. But you can see when you approve these settings, you're going to notice that the image is now turning out to look blurry and you don't have the details, but that shouldn't be your worry. Come and select the high frequency layer and now activate or turn on the visibility of the high frequency layer. So for the high frequency layer, we want to get back the textures that we removed from the low frequency layer. And in order to do that, we're just going to come to image and we're going to come to apply image. So just come all the way down to apply image. So when you click on that, you're going to get this other window showing on top of the original Photoshop window. So you have to notice that we have 16-bit images and 8-bit images. So under source we have the original image, that is the information of the image, which is our image 2784, and it is a TIFF file that was exported from, or the image that we imported from Capture One. And you can say channel is RGB. So we have to select the layer that we want to steal the textures from, which is the low frequency layer. Remember, when we remove the textures, we hid them somewhere under the low frequency layer. That's why you have to select the low frequency layer. And if at all you're dealing with an 8-bit image, you have to simply come and select the blending mode, which is subtract, and make sure the opacity is 100. Preserve transparency and mask are not checked. The scale has to be 2 and offset 128. The reason for that is because we want to put the textures on a 50% gray of the colors in the RGB, which is 256. So meaning 256 divided by 2, you get the offset, which is 128, which is a 50% gray. That's why you can see that we have all the textures on this gray kind of layer. And make sure after doing that, if at all you're dealing with an 8-bit image, always make sure the invert option is not checked or not activated, and always make sure the preview option is on. So since we are dealing with a 16-bit image, simply come and select the low frequency layer and change the blending mode from whichever it is and change it to add. Opacity at 100, preserve transparency and mask are not checked. The scale has to be 2 and offset 0, and make sure the invert option is turned on, and you get back the textures on this gray kind of layer. So that's the difference between 8-bit and 16-bit images when you're doing frequency separation. And simply come and hit OK. So when you hit OK, now this has really worsened. So we want to get back the original details or information in the image. So simply come and change it from normal and look for linear light, just like that. So when you come and hit linear light, you're going to get back the image the way it was meant to be before. So what we're going to do, we're going to put all these two layers in a group. So hold down Command or Control and click on both layers and simply hit Control or Command J on the keyboard. So I'm just going to undo, Control or Command J on the keyboard. So it has to be Command G rather, not J. So to put these two in a group, so hit Command G or Control G to put them in a group. So name this frequency separation, just like that. And you can see when you turn this on and off, there is no difference between the original background image and the frequency separation group that we have created. That means we have successfully separated the frequencies, or we have successfully divided the image into the textures and the colors. So we're just going to open this frequency separation group, and what we want to do, we want to create a black and white layer inside of the frequency separation group. So in order to do that, simply come and select the high frequency layer and come to the adjustment layer. So if at all you want to create any adjustment layer on top of a given layer, so you have to select that very layer and simply come and change it or select whichever adjustment. So for this case, we just want black and white on top of the high frequency layer. So we are just going to target the reds of this image and simply drag towards the left hand side, just like that, to darken the image. So you have to darken the image up to a point when you're seeing that you have those uneven skin tone inconsistencies, just like that. I think that is fair. So after you have done all that, you have to use Command minus to zoom out. Like I said, always make sure that the caps lock is on, so you can see when it is on, whichever tool you're going to be using is going to turn out to be like a cross icon. And when I turn caps lock off, you can still get back the tool that we initially had before. So since skin retouching is all about dealing with the colors and the skin tones, we're just going to come and select the low frequency layer, which contains the colors and the skin tones, and come and get a tool that is going to enable us blend these uneven skin tones quite well, so that we can have nice and smooth transitions within the skin tones. So for example, you can see we have these inconsistencies right here. So just want to get a tool that is going to enable us blend or even out the skin tones in those particular areas. So that tool is called a mixer brush tool. So you have to simply right click under the brushes and get the mixer brush tool. And for other versions of Photoshop, you can check right down below here to get a mixer brush tool. So we want to set up this brush to give us the best results when we are doing our skin retouching. So it's just going to come to the settings and make sure that it is a clean brush. So we have two settings right here. The first one is load the brush after each and every stroke, and the second one is clean the brush after each and every stroke. Remember, on the skin of the model, we are going to be dealing with quite different tones or colors. That's why we want the brush to be clean every single time we are trying to even out the skin tones. So make sure the wetness is around 9%, because you don't want color spill when you're trying to blend or even out the skin tones. Load is 75, mix 90, flow at 100. Settings, wetness is 9 because you don't want color spill when you are trying to even out the skin tones of the image. Load is 75, mix is 90, and the flow at 100%. So since we are dealing with the colors in the low frequency layer, make sure sample layers is not checked or marked, because when this is checked, it is going to be painting textures too in this very image. So just make sure that you have the low frequency layer selected and simply zoom in just like that. So just don't over zoom in. Make sure you zoom in reasonably, because when you over zoom in by holding down Command plus, you're not going to be able to see those skin tone inconsistencies. So make sure you zoom out and you have that point when you can see everything quite well. And when you get the mixer brush tool, you can easily increase on the size of the mixer brush tool by using the box brackets after the P key on the keyboard or the P button, and simply start evening out those tones. So I'm just going to simply left click and hold down that button and simply start moving the mixer brush tool on those areas I want to even out, just like that. So as you're doing this, make sure you even out the midtones alone, the highlights alone, and the shadows alone in an image, if at all you want the best results, because you don't want to drag color or skin tones from one area to another, because that is going to be distorting the original shape of the model's face, and we don't want that. We just want everything to remain as natural as possible. So let's just blend these areas. So let's turn off the black and white layer to see what we have done for just those few strokes of the mixer brush tool. So this is the before and after. Before, after, you can see I've just blended or even out the skin tones in those particular areas. So let me just zoom out to see if at all I've done a decent job. So just come and even out. You can as well work without the help of this black and white layer if at all you do trust your site. So I don't trust mine, that's why I'm just going to turn this back on and continue evening out those tones. So we have midtones right here. I'm just going to blend those alone and come to these shadows or this cheekbone and just blend it. So we have midtones right here. I'm just blending. The one moving the mixer brush tool, I'm just moving it in a way a particular area is shaped, and I just don't want to distort the original. Remember, light shapes a given object, so if at all you distort the original way light was falling on that area, you're going to be distorting the shape of an image. So make sure you don't distort that particular lighting. That's why I would and always recommend you guys to always follow the lighting pattern. So you can see I'm mixing the midtones alone, the highlights alone, and the shadows alone. So again, let's turn this off and we see what we have done for the mixer brush tool so far. This is the before, after, before, after. You can see we're just blending or evening out on the skin tones in this image. So when it comes to the nose area, you can see we have these shadows on this right hand side. Just come and blend those areas alone, just like that. And come this other side and also blend this other side alone. Increase on the size depending on the area you're trying to blend or mix, and continue blending or evening out the tones just to harmonize them and have a cleaner look on the images. So just come the shadows. So remember, skin retouching is an overall process. Don't only mix or blend the face alone. Just make sure you blend every component of the image so that it doesn't make you to look like a careless researcher. That's why I'm also doing the blending on the hands or the arms of the model, just like that. So just continue evening out on those areas and come to the hands and still continue evening out on these areas. So just come and even out those areas to have this image have a nice or a nicer and cleaner look from the skin retouching process. So let's zoom out and we see what we have done so far for the mixer brush tool. Turn off the black and white layer and you can see the before and after, before after for the model's face. So next thing we want to do is incorporating another tool or technique for using frequency separation to fine tune the areas we may have missed out when we're using the mixer brush tool. And in order to do that, we can simply come and select the black and white layer and simply delete it. Come back and select the low frequency layer, and this time around get the lasso tool. So this tool is going to enable you fine tune the areas that you may have missed out when you're trying to use the mixer brush tool to blend or even out the colors or skin tones of the image. So this time around, you're just going to zoom in all the way in and simply come and draw a shape. So only, and before you can draw a shape, make sure the feathering, so the feathering is 22 pixels and anti-alias is selected because we don't want to have a harsh selection on the skin. We just want to have nice and soft edges on the skin area when we are trying to fine tune the areas we may have missed out when we are using the mixer brush tool. So just come and draw. So I'm basically left clicking and holding down and moving my cursor around the skin area. So as you're doing this, make sure you don't select the eyebrows and maybe the hair and the edges of your images. Just do that, and when you're done doing all that, simply come back to filter and come back to blur, then come to Gaussian blur and you get back this box. Remember, this is what we did when we are using the or creating the frequencies of the image. So simply come to the radius and start moving to the right hand side up to a point when you feel like you have the best texture on the images you're trying to retouch. So for this case, I think at around 30 it is fine. But what I found out recently is, remember we had this radius 10%. So for whichever radius you may have used when you're creating or dividing the frequencies of your image, simply make sure that you multiply that radius by, so make sure you multiply it by 3 to get the best skin texture out of the image. So for this case, I'm just going to multiply 10 by 3, which is 30, and just type in 30, and you can see we have relatively the same skin result. So just hit OK, and you just want to apply this effect onto the rest of the image. So just come and draw those shapes the way the face is shaped, and come and apply the Gaussian blur effect to fine tune the image even more. So just come and draw that shape, right click and come to Gaussian blur, and if at all you feel like the effect is too much, simply click Shift or Shift Ctrl F or Shift Command F on the keyboard to reduce on the opacity of the effect on those areas. So I'm just going to leave everything at 100% because I want you guys to see the results, because YouTube tends to compress videos when they're uploaded. That's why I want to leave everything at the maximum so that you guys can learn and see the difference that we are trying to make or achieve from the skin retouching process. So just right click and come to Gaussian blur and come to the nose area. So when it comes to the nose area, most people tend to select the whole nose as a whole. So remember, when you select the whole nose as a whole, it is going to flatten the nose. So make sure, like we use the mixer brush tool, make sure that you select the shadows alone, and when it comes to this highlight, don't apply Gaussian blur to the maximum. Make sure you don't flatten the nose, simply reduce on the opacity. So you can right click and come to fade Gaussian blur, and you can reduce on the opacity if at all you wanted to apply it on that area. So I think I want to use around 4, and I think that is fine. So let's see what we have done for the skin retouching. So this is the image before, and this is the after, before, after, before, after. So next thing we want to do is removing the blemishes from the image. And in order to remove blemishes, we have various tools that we can use to remove or clean up the skin. So for this case, I'm just going to be using the patch tool. So you can use whichever tool you want. So just going to come and select the patch tool. It is normal and source is destination, and just going to use command plus to zoom in and simply select the high frequency layer which is containing the textures of the image, and simply left click and draw over the blemish to eliminate it. So how I'm doing this, I'm simply left clicking and drawing over the blemish, and after it has been selected, I'm just going to drag it, left click and drag it to a clean area to replace it with a cleaner skin. So that is how I'm using the patch tool to clean up the model's skin. So I'm just going to do this for almost all the blemishes on the model's face. Remember, always and always make sure you take your time while removing the blemishes, because blemish removal is going to contribute over 80% to your overall skin retouching process. Make sure you don't leave any blemishes in your retouched images. So that's why I always take my time, and I don't want to forward anything because I don't want you guys to see or come to a tutorial and act like you're seeing magic from a tutorial that you have been watching from at the very start. Make sure you don't leave out the blemishes, rather that is what I'm trying to mean. So let's come to the forehead and simply select and drag to a clean area, left click and draw over the blemish and move that to a cleaner area to replace it with cleaner skin or a cleaner part of the skin. So as you can see, sometimes a tool may not work best for you, so I'm just going to undo the blemish removal on that area and get my clone stamp tool, and make sure sampling rather is on the current layer and align is selected, normal and opacity and the flow at 100%, and simply reduce on the size by using the box brackets. So hold down the alternate to and left click on a clean area and simply click over the blemish to get rid of it. So I'm basically going to be using the clone stamp tool for the remaining blemishes in this very image. So make sure you take your time to clean up and remove blemishes from all the images you'll be retouching. So just do that, and when you're done doing all that, the next thing you're going to be doing is color grading. And for the color grading process, you're just going to be using simple tools. So I would recommend that you don't return from this video, just stay watching, because the color grading is going to transform your skin retouching and take you to a whole new level of maybe photography. So make sure you don't switch off and watch this to the very end. So, and as you're removing these blemishes, you can simply always make sure you zoom in and zoom out to see the areas you may have handled the wrong way, and come and handle them yet again. So just do that for the rest of the image. So let's do that and clean up these areas. So you can see the clone stamp tool is really nice and powerful, and it gets the job done rather. So let's just clean up those areas. So you can see that we are doing a really nice and wonderful job with the blemish removal. So you can remove the blemishes at a distance, or you can zoom all the way in if at all you want a nicer and cleaner job for the blemish removal from all your images in Photoshop. So let's just do this. And when we're done doing this, we are going to be doing the color grading process. I think we are almost done with this, or we are done with the blemish removal from this particular image. So I think that is fine. So let's get rid of these tiny blemishes. Remember, these little things that make a difference in your portrait. So just come and clean up these harsh blemishes from those areas. And I think that looks fine and beautiful. So the next thing we want to do is the color grading process. So let's see what we have done for skin retouching overall. This is the image initially, before and after, before, after. So what we want to do is the color grading. So in order to color grade the images better, you're just going to create a stamp visible layer by holding down Shift Alternate Command E on the keyboard, or Shift Alternate Control E on the keyboard to create a stamp visible layer for all we have done for the skin retouching. So I'm just going to hold down Shift Alternate Command E on the keyboard, or Shift Alternate Control E on the keyboard, and I'm just going to come to the camera raw filter. So come to filter and come to the camera raw filter, and simply wait for it to load, and now come all the way down to the calibration option. So what we're going to be doing, we're just going to turn down the saturation of the red primary, I think around negative 15, and we're also going to do the same for the saturation of the green primary, just to around negative 5, and do the same for the blue primary, I think to around, let's do it to around 10. I think that is fine. This is a before and after. Then the next thing we want to do is coming to the HSL panel. So the HSL panel is more about the hue, saturation, and luminance. So I'm just going to come this luminance, and I'm just going to drop down the luminance of the oranges. So just like that, and take it, I think, to around negative 13. And you can see the before and after so far, and we have a nice and more professional skin tone. So since I feel like I have more reds in the skin area, I'm just going to come the saturation or the hues of the reds and just turn them towards the orange side, just like that, to get rid of the reds in the skin tones of the model. And I'm also going to push up my oranges towards the yellows, just like that. So this is the before and after, before, after. Then I want to add a little bit of contrast to the image. I'm just going to come to the basic panel and simply increase on the contrast of the image, just like that, and add a little bit of blacks to the image. So you can see the image before and after for the color grading. So the next thing we want to do is doing the eye whitening. So we're going to be using a tool known as the adjustment brush tool. So I'm just going to zoom into the eyes, or you can simply use Command plus and zoom into the eyes. You can use the space bar and left click to hover around the area. So Command plus to zoom in to the eyes. So for eye whitening, we want to get the adjustment brush tool, and in order to use this tool, well, you have to first of all analyze the colors in the white area of the eye. So the colors we have some yellows and some greens and some other random colors that don't belong to yellows and greens in the white area. So if at all we are able to eliminate those colors from the white area, we are going to be whitening the eye. So you're just going to come the temperature, and the opposite of yellow is blue. So move this to around -24. And for the tint, since we have some greens in the white area, the opposite of green is magentas. You're just going to move this towards 65. And since we want the eye to pop a little bit more, you're just going to move this to around 4 and the highlights to 4, and do the same for the whites. And since we have those random colors, we're just going to reduce the saturation to around -68 and simply left click and start painting over the eye. So you can use the same technique for the teeth whitening if at all you want to do some teeth whitening to the images. So for this case, I only want to do the eye whitening to this very image. So use the spacebar left click and drag towards the direction you want to go to, and now continue whitening this second eye. So you can as well enhance the catch light by also painting over it, just like that. So command minus to zoom out to see what we have done for the eye whitening. So this is the before and after, before after. I feel like the image is a little bit saturated. I'm just going to come the vibrance and simply drop down the vibrance to around -8 and do the same for my saturation to around -4. I think that is fine. So this is the before color grading, and this is the after. Before, after. We're just going to go back into Photoshop for the final color grading process. So this is the before color grading and after, before, after. So we're just going to come to the selective color option, and under selective color we have different colors right here. For the colors we're going to be dealing with in this case is the reds and the blacks, or maybe a little bit of yellow. So come the reds, and you can simply reduce on the amount of yellows in the reds. So just want to do a little bit to around -3, and come to the blacks, and I want to add a little bit of blacks to the image. So move the blacks up to around 4 can do for this image, and I'm just going to push in a little bit of my yellows to around -2, and I think that looks fine for me. So this is the before and after for the selective color option, and if at all you want, you can add a little bit or one final brightness and contrast layer and simply push up the contrast even more. I think at around 6, that looks fine for me. So let's see the overall color grading and retouching for this image. This is like an overview. So first of all, I'm just going to turn this off. So this was the image, the original image, and this is the image after skin retouching. Then we created a stamp visible layer by holding down Shift Alternate Command E on the keyboard, and we color graded it into camera raw filter, and we did some little bit of eye whitening using the adjustment brush tool. Then we came to selective color and did some little bit more of color grading. Then we have finally added some contrast into this image. So this was the image initially, before and after, before, after. I hope you guys love the results. So the last thing we want to do is exporting this image. So we want to export this image in a way that it is not going to be able to change in color after we have been able to post it or printed it out. So in order to do that, simply come to File and come to Export and come to Export As. So when you come to Export As, you're going to get back another window right here, and it is going to open. So under Preview we have the image window, then the information right here, which is the name of the image, then the format, quality, and everything right here. So let's wait for that to load. So this is the image we have right now. So come and select the format. I prefer a JPEG. Quality, I prefer 100%. I'm just going to leave the image size the way it is, but the last thing I want to tamper with or mess up with is resampling. So if at all you want a sharp image, have to change resample to bicubic sharp if at all you want a very crisp sharp image. Canvas size, I'm just going to leave it the way it is, and I don't want to add any metadata to the image. I'm just going to simply come to color space and select, make sure you check convert sRGB and embed color profile so that the image doesn't change in color after you have been able to export it or save it. And when you're done doing all that, simply come and hit export, and it's going to open another window for you. Choose a destination where you want to save the image. For this case, I'm just going to leave mine to the desktop, and I can rename this to the model. So I'm just going to name that Jasmine. So Jasmine, and select the location and simply hit save, and it is going to take a few seconds, and when it is done exporting, it is automatically going to close this window for you and open back into Photoshop. So basically, this has been an in-depth tutorial about how to do skin retouching using frequency separation, how to color grade in Capture One and in Photoshop, how to remove blemishes, how to do eye whitening, and finally how to export your images the best way so that you can have sharp and more professional images. I'm Ronix from ronnixphotography, and if I told you I've loved this story, don't forget to like this video and don't forget to subscribe this channel. If I told you're watching this video for the very first time and you have never subscribed, and I'll see you in yet another tutorial, and don't forget to keep practicing and keep creating.